Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Good afternoon. It's Friday, April 29th. There is a lot to talk about. I am Robert Press, your host. I am a newspaper reporter and host of this show. Let me introduce my co-host, Mr. Anthony RIVIECCIO. Anthony, say a few words about yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Professor Anthony RIVIECCIO. As most people know, I have 3 lives, which are actually going very crazy this week. My first life is I am a 31-year income tax and financial advisor, which I'm in the middle of mini vacation. Thank God I can get some of my gray hair to straighten out. My second life, where I'm giving final exam, where I gave my last final exam yesterday, I'm a personal finance professor at both Herbert H. Lehman and Monroe College. And my third life, which brings me here, is I am the founder of a wonderful political organization in the Northwest Bronx called Northwest Bronx Democrat.
Okay, I think we still have time left to do the show. Let's start off with Vice President Kamala Harris. It appears that she caught COVID, Anthony. How was she at the Bronx, at the Albany Democratic thing with the Black and Latino caucus that she caught COVID from? How do you think she got COVID, Anthony? Did she catch it?
How she got COVID might be the question of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can eliminate certain things, like we know we didn't get it from her staff because she fired all of her staff. We know she didn't get it from President Biden because we know she's not in the inner circle of President
Well, you mean
Biden.
like it's like, wait a minute, let me
stop.
stop you there, Anthony. You mean she's not in his inner circle like Kathy Hochul wasn't in Andrew Cuomo's inner circle?
Pretty much.
Okay, so she's just there for show.
As sadly most second-in-commands are. Second-in-commands have the choice of being one of 2 things, very aggressive or very passive. Most take the passive approach, hoping to go higher up in the political hierarchy.
Well, who do we see as a Democratic? Now, I'm going to digress a little, Anthony. And this is what we didn't plan this, but since Anthony brought this up, do we see Joe Biden running for a second term, or do we see Kamala Harris running for this next, in 2024? Or is it going to be someone else? That's going to be the question.
Well, Joe, I could only go by what Joe Biden has already said. Joe Biden has already said he's looking forward to a second term. I think only God can make that final determination as to whether he has a second term or not. I'm sure Kamala Harris would love to replace him. And I think this is where it's going to be a very ugly Democratic fight because from both Washington and outside of Washington, there are people that are already saying, maybe, God forbid, if Joe decides, not to run or, if the good Lord takes him away, that, some people believe that Kamala Harris may not be the answer.
No, would you be surprised if Andrew Cuomo tries to run for president?
Wow.
I know he's got to be governor first. All right, let's move on. As you said with Joe Biden, let's go to our Bidenomics section because the stock market, Anthony, has been going like this. Up and down and up and down. It went up 600 points, down 900 points, up 200 points. What's going on, Anthony, with Bidenomics?
Bob, that's a very good analogy you just made because when we talk about the financial markets this week, that's exactly what's happening. It's going up and down, up and down. But if you would ask me as of right now, this moment, what is the market doing for the week? Even with the up and down, it is actually at 0.0%. We were up 1% for the week. If anyone's not familiar with what the market is doing at this moment during the noontime hour, we're down about 1% for the week. So if the market closed right now, and yes, we've had 1% gyrations every day, all day, we will probably close flat for the week. Of course, we've had many things happening in the financial markets this week. Twitter will now be a private organization. Quarter GDP has now been down 1.4%. personal income and spending numbers came out this morning. I find it very interesting that personal income can go up 0.5%, but consumer spending also went up 1.1%. So, these things, as I've said, and of course we'll talk about it more at Financial Focus University at 5 p.m.,
Right.
to me, bring a troubling Bidenomics program.
Also, the Rent Guidelines Board here in New York City is going to have to vote on how much the increase will be. And right now they're saying anywhere from 2.9% to 4.5% for a 1-year lease and 4.5% to 9% for a 2-year lease. Now,
what you're going to see average is 1-year leases of 4%, 2-year leases of 7%. Welcome to 1979 inflation, everybody.
Well, back then that was bank interest was 14%. Can we see that again soon?
Well, I hope we don't get to the 1980s. What you're referring to is the low 1980s, when yes, 12, 13, 14% was sadly normal. But we're heading in a stagnation, stagflation, I should say, type of market where that could be possible.
Well, all right, let's move on, because last week we had a guest, Dion Powell, who read an article from the Bronx Times, but Anthony was all upset about it. And why were you upset? He didn't read the entire article, or he didn't read certain parts of it?
Let me answer that two ways, Robert. First and foremost, I guess I'm going to apologize to our audience before I sort of slightly apologize to you. It was very unprofessional for me to have my hair blow out. Notwithstanding, hi, Mr. Powell, I see he's made a comment, whatever that is. Notwithstanding the end of income tax season, where I was already in a tizzy. The bottom line is that, being a Bronxite for 40 years, I take it very personal when someone directly or indirectly tries to affiliate me or my organization as being racist. And, notwithstanding that Mr. Powell, who doesn't live in our neighborhood, has no bearings to the neighborhoods, has no idea that the building in question, the topic of the article, has had a variety of issues within the neighborhood itself.
Right.
Of course, I don't expect Dion to know any of those things simply because he doesn't live there. But, to just, bring them up slight by slight, and then try to turn it into. And remember what he said on our show last week, even before it came up. What did he say? And I'm going to quote him. He said, "If you're looking for a racist perspective, I'm your man." Right? That's pretty much what he said. So, to come into a neighborhood that he doesn't live in, and sadly it was mine, and make these, off the wall comments. Again, I apologize to our audience. That was very unprofessional of me. Bob, I apologize.
Well, let me read
through it.
Let me read the entire article. I mean, it's a long article. It goes on. It mentions other people in here, and just tell me to stop when you know that you were very vilified.
I think, in my own opinion, I'm not going to stop you at all, because I think.
Okay. Well, it's a long article, Anthony. Okay. It's called "Residents Express Concern About Quality of Life on Villa Avenue in Bedford Park." It opens up, "For many years, Villa Avenue in Bedford Park was a quiet Italian neighborhood. But years later, people expressed concerns about how the neighborhood has changed. Anthony RIVIECCIO, 59, a 35-year resident of Bedford Park, told the Bronx Times that the neighborhood was always considered suburbia. It has been that way until the last 20 years, he said. Now full of drugs, garbage, and homeless people, he said that it seems the community has done a 180.
Don't you fucking misquote me.
What? Well, that's a little, all right, let me continue.
Line. Put that shit up and read it line by fucking line.
You didn't let me finish.
I don't have to let you finish. Producer, cut him off now. Cut him off now. I want his ass off now.
No, Anthony,
What I plan on doing is absolutely nothing. I'm going to get back to work. I'm going to smoke my legal reefer, and you enjoy the rest of the show.
Right, Anthony, this is what happens when you become famous. People start
No,
attacking.
this is what happens when you allow bullshit.
All right, can we continue with the letter? Okay. The community has done a 180. The RIVIECCIO contacted the police, but was told due to budget cuts, quality of life issues are simply on the bottom of the totem pole right now. He felt that some of the drug use was the result of Project Renewal's men's shelter at 3114 Villa Avenue, but stressed that the project is not to blame for everything. RIVIECCIO has spoken at community board and precinct council meetings, yet nothing has changed. It's almost reminded me of the 70s, he said. I understand we can't go back to the way the neighborhood used to be. Fellow Bedford Park resident Shannon Gilstad said, shared his concerns. Gilstad, 37, said things have really gotten worse within the last 5 years. Gilstad told the Bronx Times that she spoke with Community Board 7 District Manager Aisha Bravo about this and was told it is a borough-wide issue. According to Gilstad, Villa Avenue was a working-class neighborhood, but today is filled with abandoned and demolished buildings and tons of drug use. She often sees men drinking under scaffolding and others coming down off heroin. In fact, her husband noticed several cars were broken into and called the cops. Since none of the vehicles belonged to him, police said there was nothing they could do. I can't remember the last time I've seen cops on Villa Avenue, she commented. I don't know what more can be done. In addition to Project Renewal, Gilstad claimed that 3188 Villa Avenue, also known as Villa House, is said to be getting its residents from NYCHA lists and also drug treatment programs. While these buildings are being knocked down and sold to developers who create shelters, drug programs, and affordable housing, she is upset that the residents have no say in what is built in their community. She noticed that most of the people on the street are not just homeless, but also drug addicts. These types of developments are being concentrated in certain communities. She said, this will affect us for generations. Meanwhile, on the Upper West Side, the rich get a lawyer and sued the city for turning hotels into temporary shelters for COVID. This is what we face in the Bronx and have for the better part of 5 decades. All right. That is, I can verify that because I'm a reporter and I've seen it all over the Bronx. It's going with the South Bronx, the Middle Bronx, the West Bronx, and now it's coming to the East Bronx. I was a part of a task force that helped stop a homeless shelter on White Plains Road. So is it racism? Dion, you could put up all the comments you want, Dion. It's not going to help. And we're just going to move on, Anthony. You want to say anything more about this, Anthony?
No, the only thing I want to do, Robert, is say thank you. I want to thank you for reading the entire article because some people might take Shannon's comments to be a little harsh. I wouldn't say she's 100% accurate either. However, Sharon, of course, also has lived in the neighborhood for decades. So I do take her comments to be very credible. But would some people consider them harsh? They would. And whether you consider them harsh or not, they weren't mine. So I appreciate you reading the article. Thank you.
I mean, I'll just mention that there is a homeless shelter, adult men's homeless shelter on Westchester Avenue, about a block from Assemblywoman Karina Reyes' office, which is also across the street from a public library, a Head Start program for children K-3, and within 2 blocks of 2 schools. And when that was being heard, it was said that sex offenders, level 1 and level 2 sex offenders, are allowed in that homeless shelter. So this is what you're having in homeless shelters: level 1, level 2 sex offenders. You're having drug users, people, and they're not getting the programs. When we fought this White Plains Road shelter, we asked, are these people going to get programs? And we were told, well, we're going to have a counselor. Okay.
Well, Robert, you bring up a very interesting point. I guess maybe we'll bring it back into politics. Last week, Mr. Powell claimed that this was his petition team, right? He said that. So you're saying now his petition team are drug addicts and drug dealers? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
Well, you just said those were the people in the houses. And
That's
Mr. Powell last week came
said.
on our show and said he's gone into the houses and created a team.
Well, that's what was said. And I read what Ms. Gilstad said about the Villa Avenue house. Okay.
No, I just find it very coincidental that you just indicated what are in these houses. And last week, Mr. Powell indicated he had a wonderful petition team inside of these houses.
I'm not going to go
there.
I
just find that very coincidental.
I'm not going to go there. And we have a guest in the second half who I want to bring on, Mr. Christian Amato, and the second half who we're going to have a very nice conversation with. But let's get into our local politics. As we know, the maps for the state Senate and Congress have been thrown out. They have to be redone by a special master up in upstate New York from the judge. And he's working on them right away, and they have to be made by May 28th. There's going to be a new election for state Senate and for Congress. People are going to have to go out and petition again because the districts aren't going to be the same. There was a rally for a state Senate candidate in Riverdale, and Congressman Richie Torres, who covers the South Bronx, was there. The maps that were thrown out had him covering Riverdale, and he said, "Oh, it's going to be wonderful having me here in Riverdale. I love Riverdale, but I'll bet you on these new maps, he's not going to have Riverdale, right, Anthony?"
As I said to you off air, and I haven't figured it out, but I think it was both wonderful and sad, and it might be a historical question later on. Who was the shortest congressman to represent Riverdale? It might be Richie Torres for about 12 days.
And Congressman Jamal Bowman knew that he was going to lose Riverdale, so he abandoned Riverdale. Now, when this special master comes in, I wouldn't be surprised if Jamal Bowman represents Riverdale again. And what are people in Riverdale going to say? You abandoned us. We don't want you back. Okay, go over to Mount Vernon on the east side of the Bronx, Co-op City. But, and it seems we have a similar situation in the state Senate, where Alessandra Biaggi decided she wants to run for Congress in this district number 3 that ran from all the way up in Westchester County to eastern Long Island, which I'm sure is going to be thrown out again also. So she's in a situation, well, will she run for her old Senate seat? On New York One last night, she said, no, I'm running for Congress, which means she might wind up running against Jamal Bowman because that was the area that her grandfather had. And she had the notion of, I want grandpa's seat back. So will she be running against Jamal Bowman? Will she be running for state Senate? Well, she said no. So we'll see. Mr. Producer, can you show that picture of the rally in Riverdale that I sent you, if you can? This was a rally in Riverdale for one of the candidates that the Bronx Democratic Party is endorsing. It was in Riverdale, and I kind of wondered, where were the people from Riverdale? The only people from Riverdale were Jeffrey Dinowitz, the assemblyman, his son, the councilman, Eric Dinowitz, Farrah Rubin, who used to work for Jeff Klein, and Mark Jonai. And when I spoke to her afterwards, she's a neighbor of the candidate. And there was one more Riverdalian that I know, David Hockhauser, and that was it. And as far as Riverdale, that's Ben Franklin area. Where were everybody from the Ben Franklin Club? Well, you know who was there besides Jeffrey and Eric? Dan Paternek was there. But he doesn't live in Riverdale. He lives outside of Riverdale. And when he was running for Community Board 8 chair, I made the notion. I said it would be great to have a person from outside of Riverdale finally as the chair of Community Board 8. All right, but let's move on to that, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I think, it brings up a number of interesting questions. Bill Weiss, who is now running for male district leader in that area, was quoted as saying that, I guess after several years of having the same Ben Franklin ticket, the powers that be have now changed that ticket. They've indicated they're trying to get more youth into the ticket, although their new female district leader is about 80 years old, but they still claim they're getting youth into the ticket. I find it very amazing especially with our organization being very close to Ben Franklin. So we've had our fights as well as victories together. But I find it very surprising that after knowing that organization for 20 years, that a Riverdale event would show with not one but two Dinowitzes and no members of the Ben Franklin Club.
Well, there was one.
I think there's more to that than meets the eye.
Well, I mean, they had State Senator Jose Serrano from the bottom of the Bronx. They had Assemblyman Kenny Burgess from the South Bronx, which Assemblyman Dinowitz called State Senator Burgess, which may be a hint, I don't know. And basically, it was very few people. There was Yudeka Tapia from below Fordham Road. Here's the picture, and most of those people are from the Carpenters Union, because this was an event planned by Jamal Bailey, the chairman of the Bronx Democratic Party. And these carpenters come to every one of his events. So if you look at that, I would say 3/4 of those people in the picture were from the Carpenters Union. All right. Then you have your elected officials, a few, Richie Torres, you have the candidate there in the middle, you have her friend, and then you have Assemblyman Dinowitz standing next to Congressman Torres in the back, his son on the other side. You have, and then the other South Bronx elected officials. So, I mean, I can't see how this could be called a Riverdale rally. But meanwhile,
let me ask you a question. And you got the picture right up there. This new Ben Franklin ticket, are any of them up there?
No, there was there were district leaders there. There were two district leaders, but they were from Manhattan.
Right. So basically, Ben Franklin just put together a new tree, as I like to call it, of what they call our new blood. And none of this new blood was at that rally.
Well, it reminded me of the year Rudy Giuliani ran against David Dinkins. Jeffrey Dinowitz was standing outside 141 with a sign, "Vote for Dinkins." All right, while 95% of the club were backing Rudy Giuliani. That's what this brought back to me. It says Jeffrey Dinowitz is there with his son and nobody else, because they're all backing somebody else. That's what it appeared to me.
Well, Bob, I think you're right and wrong. I think, yes, I can understand where those sentiments come up looking at that picture. But the difference is that, or as you said, Ben Franklin came out before and supported the candidate. Well, Ben Franklin's on record supporting this candidate. So where are they?
Right. It's candidate Migliana Camilo, I believe is her name. I might have pronounced the first name a little wrong. It's hard. And she was a elections commissioner at the Board of Elections for a year and a half during the the ranked choice voting. And she's quoted as saying the 175,000 ballots that were counted, which were sample ballots, well, it was human error. Okay, so, but let's move on, because we have to go and talk about Brian Benjamin. He's still being mentioned in the news. Kathy Hochul first said, "Oh, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to pressure anybody to get him off." And now she seems to be pressuring people to get Brian Benjamin off. The Assembly has an Assemblywoman that already is said that I'm going to make a bill, and it's running through the Assembly. And the State Senate said, and Mike Gianaris and a couple others said, we're not going to touch it. We're not going to do anything about it. Even Andrea Stewart-Cousins was on record as saying, no, we don't want to fool with the election law. However, yesterday, Kathy Hochul was in Yonkers with Andrea Stewart-Cousins, the State Senate Majority Leader. What did Kathy Hochul do? She added money to the Yonkers school budget, $25.5 million or $7.6 additional dollars to the budget. Then there was $19.6 million for the VTL aid and $12 million to the SED budget. I mean, what does that look like to you? Does that look like a bribe to you, or maybe, a little quid pro quo? I give you this money and you take Brian Benjamin off? What do you think, Anthony?
I think envelopes come in different sizes and different flavors.
And that's right, because that's your favorite word, envelopes.
I could say lollipops in this case, but I'll stay with envelope.
Well, let's go into a little further about these district lines. because we have a few minutes before our break at the half. Our guest is going to be Christian Amato, who was running for the state Senate in the it was the 36th state Senate district. We put up as an ad the 34th state Senate district, and Anthony and I had a little to do about that last night. And Anthony, why do you think it's still going to be the 36th state Senate district?
You know, Bob, I don't know what district it's going to be. I defer to the master judge who's counting his envelopes as we speak.
I think it may wind up the 35th because two districts were taken from the north of the state and put in the south of the district, and that's how New York City, one went to Brooklyn and one went to Queens/Brooklyn. So that's how New York City's numbers went up, and the 34th became the 36th. But I believe he's only going to put one in. All right, so.
What I did hear, Bob, is that because they're changing the Senate, situation, they're going to allow for a reduction of petition.
Oh, that's good. I mean, the original lines, the first lines had Jamal Bailey being my state senator. If it stays the way it is, I may just wind up running against Jamal Bailey if he's going to be my state senator.
If it stays the way it is, he's not your state senator.
Well, no, if they go back to the first lines. Okay. And because the county office is 2 blocks away from me, the Bronx Democratic County office, and I would like to be interviewed if I'm going to be in Jamal Bailey's district, I would like to be interviewed for his seat. I wonder if county will do that to me. Or are they already going to be doing
that? All it is, Bob, is under the presumption that Jamal Bailey, who doesn't represent you now, is going to represent you in this new master plan.
Well, we have to figure, Anthony, if they put the Bronx Democratic Party headquarters 2 blocks from me, down the street from me, and the first map had that inside Jamal Bailey's district, wouldn't you think that Jamal wants this area where I live?
I don't know. You just said a little bit earlier on the show, the South Bronx is getting bad, the West Bronx is getting bad, and now it's all coming to the East Bronx. So it sounds like a bad situation to me.
Although, when this first came up and we spoke about that original map, and I said, oh, look, I can run against Jamal Bailey, all of a sudden everything was thrown out. All right. And Jamal Bailey was no longer my state senator. It wound up back to being Alessandra Biaggi.
I'm sure Jamal Bailey must have had a big sigh of relief about that.
And well, Mr. Producer, we're at our halfway mark. Can we go to our commercials now, please? So we're just going to be, talking a little bit, but can we go to our commercials, Mr. Producer?
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Hey, sports fans! New York Parrot has come out with a great new show for you guys, Sports with Rich. Broadcast time 10 p.m. Tuesday evening. Rich Mancuso with Robert Rizzo as a co-host. Sports with Rich is captivating, informative, and entertaining, and it will pertain to all American sports such as soccer, football, basketball, baseball, athletics, wrestling, you name it. Get rich information from Rich Mancuso on Sports with Rich. Parrot TV, the voice for humanity. Are you curious about financial literacy? then take a look at Professor Anthony RIVIECCIO's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, if how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony RIVIECCIO, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University.
And welcome back to Talking Politics. We're going to bring in our guest, Mr. Christian Amato, but we've had one of his opponents, Lisa Hoflick, and the other person that was running in the race, Migliana Camilo. I was told by Jamal Bailey that during petitioning, he didn't want his people on the show, but after petitioning, they would be on. But I don't know if, Anthony, if we're going to get her again, if they're going to go back to petitioning. So we may have to wait till maybe August to have her on the show if she wants to come on the show. But can we bring on our guest, Mr. Producer? We don't have our guest? Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about Rich Mancuso's show, Anthony.
You know, Bob, before we get started, because I'm sure Christian will be with us in a moment, let me just say to the audience real quick, I'm hoping this is going to be a great, conversation, great interview, get some insights on what's going on, both politically as well as state budget-wise. But again, in full disclosure, I should say that our organization, Northwest Bronx Democrats, has worked with Christian Amato in several Bronx campaigns over the last several years in different capacities. So I just thought that should be put out there before Mr. Amato joins.
Hey, sports fans! New York Parrot has come out with a great new show for you guys. Sports with Rich. Broadcast time 10 p.m. Tuesday evening. Rich Mancuso with Robert Rizzo as a co-host. Sports with Rich is captivating, informative, and entertaining, and it will pertain to all American sports such as soccer, football, basketball, baseball, athletics, wrestling, you name it. Get rich information from Rich Mancuso on Sports with Rich. Parrot TV, the voice for humanity. World Inkers Monthly Magazine is a fine source for your literary interests. It's an all-source magazine with poetry, prose, and essays and articles, as well as interviews. It's all full-color art and photography from a variety of voices and artists. You will find this magazine entertaining. This is an all-purpose readership, and we are looking for new voices. This sleek, full-color edition of World Inkers Monthly Magazine will be something pleasant for your eyes as well as for your mind. And we're looking for authors for one book promotion in the magazine. If you're a business, we want to promote your business. You may submit your book reviews, your academic or non-academic articles on the humanities and the arts, as well as your literary writing and creative output to publication.worldinkers@gmail.com. World Inkers Monthly Magazine does not spare any ink. Keep inking for World Inkers Monthly Magazine.
It's summertime. Guns away. It's cookout. Guns away. Guns away. It's block party. Guns away. It's kids everywhere. I'ma drop a message. You should put the guns away. Let the kids come and play. Learn to live in peace so you can see another day. You should put the guns away.
All right, welcome back to Talking Politics. Mr. Producer, do we have Mr. Amato on yet? If not, we'll continue on our regular program then. All right, and you know what? In talking about the 34th or 36th Senate District, Anthony, I might want to run for this district because my roots are in Riverdale, okay, where I was the PA president of the school that you went to, Riverdale Kingsbridge Academy, formerly MS 141, because it was turned into a high school, and I was the PA president there. And I was also on Community Board 8. I was vice chair of Traffic and Transportation Committee, and vice chair of the Public Safety Committee, and chair of the Budget Committee. And now I've been here in the east side of the Bronx for a couple of years, and I've put my roots here. Like Christian Amato, I'm a board member of the Pelham Parkway Neighborhood Association. Like Christian, I was on the task force, community task force that fought the White Plains.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Christian.
And we defeated it.
So we go from Christian Amato to, you know what? So let's interview you then. Since we have to kill some time, and it sounds like you're making a semi-pronouncement, let's interview you. So let's talk about the 36th State Senate District. Let me interview you. So what do you believe is the first major problem that you think you could solve in the east side of your district? What do you believe is the number one problem?
Hold on. I got a message from somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You said 1257 above. Oh. Okay. I gave the wrong time. That's my fault. Okay.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
All right. So
what a mess from our state senator candidate, Robert Wright.
That's my mistake.
So come on, Bob. So what's the number one problem in the east side that you're going to fix in the first 100 days of your
What's the number one problem? Overdevelopment coming. Okay. We have a 17-story building going up in Pelham, and Mr. Producer, when he comes on, please bring him. We have a 17-story building going up in Pelham. We now have a 6-story building going up off of Pelham Parkway in Pelham. We have this Food Town mess that's going on, which I believe will be minimized.
So what's the solution for it?
What's the solution?
Mm-hmm.
Zoning.
Zoning.
Okay, he'll be on in 5 minutes, he says.
So is zoning is zoning a city or state situation?
It's a city, and here's what happened.
But you're not running for city. You're running for state senate.
Right, but the state senate makes the laws in the city. Okay, they can.
So you're saying then you're going to, through the state legislature, force the city to do this.
If some of our Bronx elected officials who have ties to developers, I mean, who gave out turkeys? We had from the developers. These elected officials were getting turkeys from developers. How many turkeys did our...
So then what would you tell your colleague, because she would be your colleague, so then what would you tell your colleague, Marjorie Velasquez?
Marjorie Velasquez.
She would be your city councilwoman.
This is what we need to do. We need to fight these buildings. We need to stop them. We need to cut them down, as was done in Riverdale. But still, even in Riverdale, they went up. As I was saying, Mayor de Blasio, when he first came in, changed the zoning on buildings from 75 feet for apartment building, which was 6 stories. He changed it to 85 feet, which allowed them to go to 8 stories. And 8-story buildings were starting to go up by you. And then if you had a community facility, or if you put in X amount of affordable housing, you can go even higher. And that's why you see those buildings by you going 10, 12 stories. Because
they're all over. They're all over now.
Right.
They're all over now. So, don't keep saying over here, over here, over here. Well, they're all over.
I know.
You just said it was the number one problem on the east side. So don't be pointing.
No,
now let's talk about Riverdale, right? Because this district is wide ranging, right? So on the east side, you got, so on the east side, of course, you have your area. Now, let's presume, right? We're going by the law. You're going to be running for a seat that also represents the South Bronx. So what's your number one goal there?
It no longer represents the South
Bronx.
No,
we're going by the old lines. The old lines represent a portion of the South Bronx as well as Riverdale. But let's go into the South Bronx. What is your number one goal?
In the South Bronx.
Or what do you believe is the number one problem in that area?
In the South Bronx is crime. Well, it's also borough-wide is crime. Crime is up in good precincts like the 49th, the 50th, and the 52nd.
The 49th and 50th don't cover that south side.
No, I know. Or the 40, the problem is, and that's where the most crime occurs.
What districts cover that south side?
What do you mean, what district? What council district?
No. What police
Precincts?
district?
Precincts, the 40th, 41st, 42nd, 43rd, 44th.
So what would you tell them as a state senator?
What would I
be the
tell them?
solution?
I would try and talk to the commissioner, okay, and see if more resources could be brought to all the precincts in the Bronx. No smoking, Anthony.
I'm smoking something legal.
It's
And it's a cigarette.
a bad example.
But so what resources could you bring from the Senate to give to the committee?
Well, I'll put it to you this way, Anthony. Every time we had a police briefing on the stats for each month, and I would see that certain things went up in one precinct, I would bring it to the mayor's attention, Mayor de Blasio's attention. And all of a sudden, that precinct wound up with 2 to 4 officers additional. Next month was another precinct. They got 2 or 4 additional.
So your solution to the South Bronx crime is to have press conferences?
No, I'm
You're going to make a pronouncement
No.
and something's going to happen.
Mhm. Do you know how they do policing, Anthony?
I'm asking you. You're the candidate.
I do.
I'm listening.
heard
We're
you
listening.
explain it.
How are you going to solve the crime problem in the South Bronx that you said was the number
The
one
same
problem?
way Mayor Adams is trying to do it right now. You deploy people to certain spots, okay? And if you remember when Rudy Giuliani came in, what was his first priority? Get rid of the squeegee guys.
Right, but you know, Robert, and forgive me, maybe I have my Financial Focus University hat on. You know, when I talk to candidates in this capacity, you know, I try to very simply explain to them city versus state problems. So they indirectly get embarrassed, sort of like you are now, when you're telling me how you're going to fix city issues through a state situation. So again, you know, what do you do as a state senator, right, to solve that South
State senator can influence the area. They can go and talk to the precinct commanders. They can go and talk to the commissioner, to the mayor, to the borough presidents. Okay, that's what the elected.
So then you would be an advocate, then, is what you're saying.
I'd be an advocate, and then I would try and pass laws. I would try and cut back on this bail reform, because what happened was the doors to Rikers was opened up, and hopefully everybody was going to be out there so they can close Rikers. But we see crime has become rampant, and now all throughout the borough and city, people are yelling, "We want this stopped." Look at what's happening in Manhattan. In the best.
No. Let's get back to the west side of the district. So we covered the east, we covered the south, and now let's talk Riverdale. That's the west side of the
Riverdale's
district.
problem.
What do you believe is the number one problem there, and what do you think from the state senate point?
Overconstruction was the number one problem in Riverdale, and now the problem is the homeless shelter that's being attempted to be built. That came from Mayor de Blasio. Mayor de Blasio said, all of a sudden, we have a large amount of single homeless adult men. Why was that? That happened right after the no cash bail law came in. Unfortunately, these homeless people were being kept in Rikers because they didn't have enough money to put up for bail. With no cash bail, they can rob somebody, they can do anything, and then they get right out, unfortunately.
So then the last question I got for you is, so all things being equal, knowing who the candidates are and presuming these candidates are not going to change their mind, should we expect a Bob Press, Christian Amato, Lisa, whatever, I apologize, I don't know her last name off the top of my head, and the other candidates, should we expect Bob Press in the race?
I would expect, Anthony, at least 1 or 2 more candidates to be coming into this race. And
I think you're right about that.
And possibly one of the candidates dropping out. Okay. Would I run? We would have to consider it. All right. I really, don't really want to run against Christian Amato. I think he's the best candidate. All right. And I wouldn't want to run against a Christian Amato. Okay. And as a matter of fact, here's Christian Amato.
Hey, there he is. Happy New Year, brother.
And I'm sorry, Christian. It was my mistake. I told him 12:57 instead of 11:57. It was my mistake. It's not Mr. Mottle's. So why don't you quickly tell us about yourself, Christian?
Sure, absolutely. I've lived in this district, formerly District 34, now District 36. Who knows what it'll be renumbered after this new round of redistricting, but I've lived in this district my entire life. My mother and father both moved here in the 50s and 60s from Italy. They're Italian immigrants. My grandfather opened up one of the first dry cleaners on Arthur Avenue. That's where my mother and father met. And after they got married, they opened up their own dry cleaner on Arthur Avenue. They bought a house on Pelham Parkway and invested their time in, growing their community, finding a good school for my brother and I. I went to St. Clair's right in Morris Park. And we were really invested in our neighborhood, really invested in growing our family and our community right here in the Bronx. And I got to learn a lot about this district as a young person. Here in the Bronx, we didn't have very many after school programs. And that's where my mother took the time to be diligent and find opportunities for my brother and I. She took us to art classes at Pelham Art Center up in Pelham. I went to high school in White Plains, so I have a very strong familiarity with the Westchester side of this district. And I've been learning about it since I was a young boy, and I become more and more passionate about this community every day.
Okay, well, I mentioned the organizations that I'm on, which are similar. They're the same organizations that you're on. So sure. Why don't you mention some of the organizations? I know you're on Community Board 11. Give us a little information about what you're doing.
Sure, absolutely. Locally, I have the privilege of serving on several local organizations. I'm on the board of Liberty Democratic Club, which is the 80th Assembly District's Democratic Club. I am on Pelham Parkway Neighborhood Association. I am a member of our Pelham Parkway Community Task Force with you. And I'm also a member of Bronx Community Board 11, where I serve as the vice chair for traffic and transportation.
Co-chair. They don't use vice chairs.
Correct.
And the upcoming meeting, I understand you're going to be chairing.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So like I said, we're very similar. But I want to get into something that's been in the news. It's been on social media, unfortunately. Sure. And we're going to have to get into it. What was this sign that you were holding? And tell us a little about. I know, you were protesting a rally that happened 2 years ago, much like Anthony was brought up with a letter, with an article in the paper from 2 years ago. Also, there is a right to protest. So tell us a little bit about what you were doing there.
Certainly. So first of all, this event that you're referring to was in June 2020. This was 2 weeks after the murder of George Floyd. This was a week after around 100 Bronxites had been brutally kettled and arrested in a protest in Mott Haven, a demonstration that was against police brutality over in Mott Haven. And then in our community here in Morris Park, some organizers from outside of the district worked with organizers within the district to put together a Blue Lives Matter rally. And so on social media, there started to be some concern that, coming 2 weeks after the brutal murder of George Floyd and countless other lost lives, a week after the horrific kettling event that happened in Mott Haven, was it culturally responsive to have officers on duty go to an event like a Blue Lives Matter rally in Morris Park? And so there was a counter demonstration, a peaceful counter demonstration that had been planned. I ended up attending with my mother and some friends, actually. And that protest ended up turning very aggressive very quickly. And the police officers from the local 49th precinct had to step in because the crowd that had attended, to rally in support of Blue Lives, got angry. And of course, our right to protest, our right to assemble is part of our freedom of speech. It's a right given to every citizen, every American citizen. And so the act of peaceful demonstration, of course, is something that I greatly support. However, in the activity of being circled by protesters, there were a bunch of young women around 16, 17, 18 years old, young women of color who were there, who had joined to protest as well. They were spit on, they were shoved, they were getting nervous. I was liaising with Captain Nativ from our local police precinct to make sure that they were safe, they were protected. And in that moment, signs were being passed around. We were
And wait, let me hold on.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Producer, can we put up the picture of the man spray painting the signs that I sent? All right, continue. I sent the picture in about it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So you were there. There was a gentleman there who showed up. He was playing music. He was spray painting signs and passing them around. And in the haste of this moment, he had passed signs down. I grabbed one. And the sign that I ended up holding ended up saying ACAB. And it's not a statement that I believe in. As a matter of fact, I really support our officers. I work with our local 49th precinct very regularly. That on Pelham Parkway Neighborhood Association or on our local community board, we regularly liaise with our officers. And so, it was an oversight. It was a moment that definitely does not represent the way I feel about our officers. We certainly need our officers in our communities feeling supported and working a beat. But it was a moment in haste. And of course, I made sure to go meet with Captain Nativ, the head of the 49th precinct at the time, and Jay Sturdivant, our community affairs officer, the very next day to talk about public safety and address these issues in our community. And this is really about allocating resources. Our officers shouldn't be attending something like this. If we want to celebrate them, we should do it the right way with a first responders barbecue, or, as an elected official can by offering citations. There are many ways to support our local police force, without having to hold a rally or without having to use these protests that pit people against each other, which is not the best way to build community in this district.
And there is another issue that's floating around on Facebook about your employment with Alessandra Biaggi. I know that you were the deputy chief of staff, and I always was making comments about Alessandra Biaggi when she came in because she was making mistakes, much like I did with Oliver Coppell when he became a councilman, because we went from somebody who was a princess, June Iselin, she was the third most powerful person in New York City as land use chair, and we went into Oliver Coppell. So I was writing about Oliver Coppell, and one of his people came over and said to me, "You're killing Oliver with what you're writing." So it's much like this, because we spoke about this a little bit, but I couldn't do anything. I have to report. It's my job to report what goes on. If the state senator is not doing a job or she's making mistakes, as I called it, I called them rookie mistakes, I have to report on them. And what the rumor is, that you falsified timesheets is the reason why she fired you. Can you address that, please?
Yeah, certainly. I served not only just as a correction, I wasn't just her deputy chief of staff, I was also her district director. So I served in two capacities. My job was not just to manage the office and the staff, but it was also to manage relationships in the district. And as as someone who attends many of our local meetings, I was a full-time staffer who worked 18 hours a day. It was my responsibility to be out in community, attending every community meeting. And that meant that most days I was working from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And as a state Senate staffer, I probably, based on the amount of time I worked, if you averaged out my salary, I probably ended up making less than minimum wage based on the amount of time I worked. However, what I will say is that as a state Senate employee, you are an at-will employee, and your timesheets are approved by your chief of staff and the senator themselves. This is the first time I'm hearing about falsified timesheets. That's certainly not true. As a matter of fact, the state Senate owes me money that they hadn't paid me. But that being said, what I believe this is probably in regards to is the fact that as a employee of the state Senate, you accumulate what's called comp time. So any time that you work over, it goes into basically a digital bucket, and it's up to the senator to decide how that time is utilized. And in the time that I worked for Senator Biaggi, she had not made a decision on how to utilize comp time, which was actually a pretty big issue in our office. That being said, there's not really a way for state Senate employee to falsify timesheets. You're an at-will employee with a salary. your time, even if you work overtime, you're not paid for that.
All right, Mr. Producer, come back to me, please. Can we come back to me, Mr. Producer? Because I have this is the picture, and can you give me a full screen? This is the picture that we're talking about, okay? As you can see, the signs are painted all over. There's a man with a mask on painting the signs and throwing them, and then people were picking them up, all right? You can see Mr. Amato here on the side with a cardboard sign, not with a paper sign. So, you know, again, they were just passed over. And I'm behind them. I'm watching this. So, and I'm, you know, just reporting on this. So is there, Tony, do you have any questions for Mr. Amato?
With 2 minutes left to go, I don't think
we're going to be able, Tony, we're going to be able.
Let me ask him the question you did.
Tony, the producer said we can run over a few minutes.
Christian, how are you?
I'm doing great. You know,
good.
We've got some new news this week with the fact that our Senate lines are up for reanalysis and redistricting again. So
that's correct. I understand you might be representing China before it's all said and done. So let me ask you the question that Robert didn't ask you.
Sure.
Which is, why do you believe you were let go, or did you quit?
I was let go, and I believe I was let go because I believe in constituent services. I've lived in this district my whole life, and I accepted the job to serve my community. And to me, it was a priority that our Senate office become a resource hub and be very ingrained with our district and serve our district well. And I felt like our constituent service apparatus could have been stronger, could have been more efficient, and we had disagreements on that. That being said, you know, for me, my top priority in the Senate will always be, one, being an ally to my staffers and helping unionization efforts in the Senate so that Senate staffers have worker protections, and two, being able to offer modern, accountable, accessible constituent services to everyone in this district. And that means finding ways to make sure that we can reach every constituent. As you know, the district director, I recognize that many of the calls we received in the Senate office were general loneliness calls from our senior population. People need services. They need someone on the other line of that phone or with an open office. And coming out of this pandemic, I'm sure you've realized that many of our elected officials' offices have been closed only to provide a phone number. And that's not the best way to serve these communities, which want to interface with their elected officials. And so I have some really great ideas about how we can do that beyond, you know, having a modern and accountable constituent service apparatus. I want to have my office open 2 to 3 days a week from 12 to 8 p.m. so that we can be servicing our constituents who are getting home and working later hours and who can't be served from a typical 9 to 5 day. And so I think we have to be more accessible and provide more ways and more opportunities for constituent services. That also means having the office open at least one weekend, one day every weekend, you know? So these are the things that I'm thinking about as we move forward and consider who might be the next senator. I want to run a very strong office that provides strong constituent services. That's what our community.
If I can, Christian, I just want to try to ask you a very short question, but I think it's maybe the appropriate question. How do you feel about what was just announced through media a couple of days ago in regards to Senator Biaggi and her decision with getting rid of the Columbus Day statue? You said you were Italian, as I'm Italian. Of course, her grandfather was both Italian and walked several in the Columbus Day parade. We all have all types of thoughts about our heritage.
Sure.
As an Italian,
yeah.
How do you feel about her recent statements on that?
Well, I think there's a lot of back and forth here. Remember that in America, Italians, want to feel represented, especially when it comes to, just civil rights, actual representation through portrayal of historical characters. The largest lynching to happen in America happened in New Orleans, and it was, 9 Italians had been lynched. So for us, that's where Columbus Day was born out of. That being said, I know that many Italians really, really respect Columbus. I respect Columbus as well. Do I find him to be our central figure in Italian history? No. But if Italians believe that he should be honored, then for me, I absolutely support it. I'd prefer to see us have an Italian-American Heritage Day over honoring one person. And I also have to say, there are so many influential Italians that we can be celebrating. After all, America is named after Amerigo Vespucci, who was arguably one of the best Italian explorers out there. What more could Italians want since America is named after an Italian explorer? Second of all, we have Garibaldi, who was the unifier of two worlds. He worked with America and trained soldiers in America too, while also unifying Italy. That's a figure in Italian history who is not just accomplished, but someone who Italians really respect and revere. And so for me, I say we have very many Italian historical figures that we can be honoring and respecting, not to mention the countless Italian Americans who have made great accomplishments in the Bronx or in New York State at large. So I prefer, rather than centering ourselves on one individual, we have to center ourselves on the accomplishments of the entire culture. So I support an Italian American Heritage Day, but I certainly don't believe we need to remove Columbus out, erase Columbus out of history. We have to look forward into history and find ways that we can continue to reestablish and redefine our culture and find pride through the accomplishments that our heritage brings to this country.
Christian, last question for you, then I'm going to turn it over to Robert. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the just announced state Senate candidate, Mr. Robert Press. What do you believe is the #1 problem in both the east side of the district and on the west side of the district? And what would you propose as a solution to that problem in a state Senate capacity?
Absolutely. I think that problem is housing and affordability. I think that we come from a community that, is largely single family homes, but in areas has quite a number of apartment buildings. And so for me, and condos and co-ops as well. And so for me, I'm really concerned with our housing stock. And I think this is a multifaceted issue, especially when you consider the fact that we do have some of Westchester in the district. So as it pertains to our homeowners, reducing property taxes is a top priority for me, especially when it comes to those Westchester residents who are waiting for a resolution when it comes to restoring some form of the SALT tax deduction. But that's $10,000 a year that those constituents are no longer getting. And, it is causing financial stress. We also have seen in the Bronx has been inundated with shelters. Our only way around that is by building fully affordable housing. But I want our housing to be not just affordable, but fully supportive. We have 40,000 Bronxites who in the next 5 years are going to become senior citizens. And we need to think about their housing situations. But also young people are not getting married as early as they used to and don't want to be paying $2,000 for a studio apartment. So I see a real case for building mixed use housing that's fully supportive with services on site, with a healthy mix of 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, and also bringing back single room occupancy units with modernized fire safety standards so that this way seniors and young people have more affordable housing solutions outside of what our current housing stock provides.
Anthony, there's no way I'm going to be able to compete with this man. I'm not running. I'm not running. I would love to support you, Christian. Okay. But we're in the media. We have to be impartial. But there's no way I can run against this man, Anthony. Anything final you want to say before we go off the air, Christian?
Well, I want to thank you both for having me on. Both of you live in the Senate district, so it's always a pleasure. Anthony, you're still in the district, right? Or if not, just at the border. Maybe you'll be back in when they.
You know what? Let me follow up on that, and I know we're short on time. But the fact that you mentioned we are in the district, just a clarification, then a question. Clarification. Liberty Democrats is not the only political club in the district, right? Hello, Northwest Bronx Democrats. But I guess the question is this. When people ask me about Miss Biaggi in the areas of Bedford Park, Norwood, which is, let's call it the central part of the district, I always try to give two trains of thought. The first train of thought is legislatively, where I personally would give her a solid B. Second part would be constituent services, where I would give her a solid F. So if I had to summarize that, I would give her a D minus. What would you give her?
You know, for me, I don't really think it's my place to assign her a letter grade. I think she's been good on legislation, but for me, my focus is on bringing community-centered leadership to this district. I believe that 95% of this district is in the Bronx, and it should be represented by a Bronxite who can bring equity to the Westchester side of this district, who can, you know, connect with the grassroots groups throughout this district, like Northwest Bronx Democrats, like City Island Rising, like Progressive Women of Pelham, and unite these forces in order to bring, you know, good services into this community, strong representation, and legislate with local matters as our top priority. And that's what I plan on doing. And I'm focused on my race and my community and making sure that we're unifying this district so that we get our fair share of what we deserve when it comes to the resources that our Albany can bestow upon us. And my job is to articulate that vision to the community and fight for it in the Senate. And that's what I plan on doing.
Good luck, sir.
Anthony, anything else you want to ask Mr. Amato?
Just wish him the very best of luck.
Thank you.
Okay. All I'm going to say is, since you're now going to be probably running in August, we may want to have you back on once or even twice, Christian. And Mr. Producer, that's going to be it. I know we went over a few minutes, so let me say goodbye for myself, Robert Press, my co-host, Anthony RIVIECCIO, and our guest, Mr. Christian Amato, who really seems like the best candidate for the state Senate seat, whatever number they give it. It's the 34th right now. It was proposed to be the 36th. It may wind up the 35th. And that's going to be it for today's show.
Keep watching The Politics every Friday.